Which paradox just mind ducks a person? The UK triple lock that people moving to the UK experience. Need proof of address and photographic ID to open a bank account. Need a bank account and photographic ID to rent a place. Need a bank account and an address to get sent your photographic ID. Checkmate atheists. This is like when I went online to schedule an appointment at the Apple store because my phone wouldn't turn on, and they sent me a verification text to my phone to confirm it was me telling them that my phone won't turn on. I cancelled my landline back in the mid-90s, even though we only had one cell phone in the house, over a similar battle with the phone company. Our landline was dead, so we walked to the nearest store and called the phone company. They told us that they couldn't schedule a technician to come out until we called them from the phone that was having the issue. The ship of Theseus always kind of fucked me. So, there's this Greek dude called Theseus, and he's on a very long boat trip home. His ship needs repair. They stop, replace a few rotten boards, and continue. Due to the particularly strenuous nature of this very long trip, several more of these stops for repairs are made, until, by the very end, not a single board from the original vessel remains. Is this still the same vessel? If not, when did it cease to be? Machu Picchu now has lots of recently rebuilt stuff grafted onto the ancient ruins. It's kinda annoying and deceptive. Unless you look at historical photos, there is no on-site indication that some of the walls and buildings you are viewing are just modern guesses as to what was once there. I sort of agree with ruins, in a sense. Especially when you're making Goose Walk. But like cathedrals, the base is Romanesque, the upper is Gothic, and the annex is High Gothic, because it had 6 builders and 12 pope changes over 200 years. If it burns down, I have zero issue with building the whole thing to the Romanesque original plans, if that's what the owners want to do, and we have the plans. In the UK series Only Fools and Horses, this paradox was given new life as Trigger's broom. Trigger was a Kevin. He worked as a road sweeper and had just been given a small award and had his picture taken for the local papers, as he had been using the same broom for 26 years. He mentioned casually to the lads in the pub that in that time it had 13 new heads and 14 new handles. When Del Boy asked in exasperation, how do we know it's the same broom then? Trigger held up the paper with the picture and said, well, there's a picture of it. What more proof do you need? Brass paradox. From Wiki, the observation that adding one or more roads to a road network can end up impeding overall traffic flow through it. The paradox was postulated in 1968 by German mathematician Dietrich Brahes, who noticed that adding a road to a particular congested road traffic network would increase overall journey time. Very evident in cities, skylines. So I know this is just a silly thing, but at my old work, my department was food service. In our prep room, you had to always wear an apron. Always, no exceptions. When leaving the prep room, you had to take your apron off to prevent cross-contamination. The bosses were trying to figure out where to put the hooks. Inside in the back of the door, or outside on the wall. Edit. Always proofread before posting. Feels like there should have been an anteroom between prep room and the larger room with apron hooks. There's a joke I heard on this. Dr. Humdina visits the same ice cream shop every day. He sits at the counter and orders 2 ice cream sundaes, one for him and one at the empty seat beside him. Every day, he finishes his ice cream and leaves the other. He pays for both and leaves. After a week of this, the owner asks about this. The doctor explains, I'm a theoretical physicist. It is theoretically possible for the matter above this stool to spontaneously coalesce into a suitable mate. I want there to be ice cream ready for them. The owner replies, well, okay, but there are plenty of people in this shop every day. Why don't you strike up conversations? Maybe you'll find a suitable mate among them. Sure, but what are the odds of that? My professor made the same infinite timescale inevitability to explain that teleportation is possible. If you wait long enough, all your particles might quantum tunnel simultaneously and to the same place, effectively making you teleport. I'll ask my thermodynamics prof if he knows about the Boltzmann brain. There is a similar thought that this is how our universe could restart after the heat death. You could have random quantum mechanical fluctuations in 10 carat 10 carat 10 carat 56 years. Had to look that up. That could create a new universe. Or if you wait long enough you will hit Poincare occurrence where random thermodynamic fluctuations would spontaneously decrease the entropy of the universe. Of course, those are highly speculative and a fake. The second one isn't considered likely and isn't really taken seriously. I've been down this road. It's really hard to convince Redditors that infinite sequences don't necessarily contain all combinations of things within the sequence. Take the classic monkeys with typewriters scenario. There is a finite amount of space in the room, and the monkeys, assuming they are immortal, have a finite number of neurons and potential configurations of those neurons. So it's entirely possible to get a repeating loop after zillions of years, rather than have every great novel written. In the brain gas example, it is also possible that no configuration of particles leads to something resembling a brain, before coming full circle. It's hard to convince Redditors outside of specialized subreddits anything counterintuitive. Infinity and randomness are very difficult to explain en masse. Also, I think you're overthinking the monkeys lol. They're just meant to be simple Turing machines pressing random buttons, which mitigates most of the problems of their internal programming on neurology. It's indeed possible that a random sequence of buttons could result in a loop, but this has probability 0 and is almost surely not going to happen. Essentially, since any repeating truncated sequence has infinite freedom left down the line to start going awry. In the case of particles in third space, there are counterintuitive results, for instance second walks being recurrent, and you almost always end up where you started, while third walks are transient, and you don't. Well, since we are talking about the quantum world, there comes a point where very unlikely actually has a probability of 0. So it may well be that compounding the improbable would result in nothing far from normality. Fun to dream though. There is a difference between effectively 0 and actually 0. A Boltzmann brain is so unlikely that over anything approaching human timescales, even over the apparent age of the universe, we can be sure that it has never happened. However, that changes when you start talking infinite timescales. If you asked Rick Astley for his copy of Disney Pixar's Up, do you think he'd give it to you? Because think about it. He's never gonna give you up. But, at the same time, if he doesn't give you up, then he's let you down. But he's never gonna let you down. So which is it? At that point, he'll just have to say goodbye and desert you. One of my favorites is Zeno's paradox. In order to leave my apartment, just for example, I have to walk halfway to my front door. Then I have to walk half the remaining distance. Then half that distance, ad infinitum. In theory, I should never be able to reach the door. Now I love this paradox, because we've actually solved it. It was a lively, well-discussed debate for millennia. At least a few early thinkers were convinced that motion was an illusion because of it. It was so persuasive an argument that people doubted their senses. Then Leibniz and/or Newton developed calculus and we realized that infinite sums can have finite solutions. Paradox resolved. It makes me wonder what calculus we are missing to resolve some of these others. Reminds me of a joke. An engineer, a physicist, and a mathematician are at a bar and see a beautiful woman across the room. They're all too nervous to talk to her, so the physicist devises a plan to work up the necessary courage. Walk half the distance from them to her, then half the remaining distance, and again, and again, and again. The mathematician says it won't work, because they will never actually get to her. The engineer says, well, it's close enough for practical purposes. An infinite number of mathematicians walk into a bar. The first orders a drink. The second orders half a drink. The third orders a quarter of a drink. The fourth orders an eighth of a drink. The bartender pours 2 drinks and says, you guys really ought to know your limits. Jim is my enemy. But it turns out that Jim is also his own worst enemy. And the enemy of my enemy is my friend. So, Jim is actually my friend. But, because he is his own worst enemy, the enemy of my friend is my enemy. So, actually Jim is my enemy. But, I see. Well, Jim needs to learn self-love then lol. He also needs to learn that identity theft is not a joke. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe.